On paper, the KTM 390 Adventure R is the closest thing to the fabled unicorn ADV bike that's available today. At 388 pounds claimed, wet, it is easily the lightest ADV bike you can buy from a dealer. That is 40 pounds lighter than any of its competitors. I have 1,400 miles on the KTM 390 Adventure R. I've taken it in the mud, sand, did some OHV trails, and I ran 3 ORBDR hard sections on purpose and 1 by accident. I've done hours on the highway and day-long rides in the woods. I did have a bit of a slow start with this one, but once it got rolling, it ended up being one of the most thorough ADV bike tests I've ever done. After all of that, how has the KTM 390 Adventure R done? Is it the unicorn or just another small ADV bike in a growing crowd of similar offerings from other manufacturers? Let's talk about it. It's important to reiterate because people always forget that this review represents my personal opinions based on the types of riding that I like to do and my own personal skill level. There's a ton of evidence of both of those things here on the channel if you want more insight into where I'm coming from. But if you're a brand new rider or a super badass expert, your opinion will be different than mine. I'm an average rider and that is who I review bikes for. Before we talk about how I feel about this bike, let's talk about the specs so that we're all on the same page. This bike comes in at an MSRP of $7,699 US, and you'll often pay a $600 freight fee on top of that. The curb weight, fully fueled, is a claimed 388 pounds or 176 kilograms. It has a fuel capacity of 3.69 gallons or 14 liters and an estimated fuel economy of 69.1 miles per gallon. That is absolute BS, by the way. It's more like 45 or 50 when I'm riding it. I know I'm heavier than the average rider, but there's no way you're getting 70 unless you're just like cruising at 50 the whole time. It has a 398.7cc LC4 liquid-cooled dual overhead cam single-cylinder engine, making 44.4 horsepower and 28.8 pound-feet of torque. It has a 6-speed transmission with a slipper clutch, and it has electronic fuel injection with ride-by-wire. Steel trellis frame with a bolt-on steel trellis subframe. Front suspension is a 43mm Apex open cartridge fork that is compression and reload adjustable with 9.1 inches or 230mm of travel. Rear suspension is a WP Apex split piston offset monoshock, very unique design. It is rebound and preload adjustable with 9.1 inches of travel as well, and it has a 21-inch front and an 18-inch rear wheel. Those are spoked wheels. Tubed tires in this one. The 390 has a seat height of 34.3 inches and a ground clearance of 10.7 inches. It has a 5-inch TFT dashboard. You can connect it to your smartphone, although I never do because that crap never works. It has lean angle sensitive cornering, traction control, and ABS. That's a very important point, which we'll get back to. It has an off-road mode, which disables the rear ABS, so you can completely disengage it, so you can slide the wheel around it if you need to. And you can get optional cruise control, which I highly recommend. It's about $300 to add it to the bike. It's got full LED lighting, full high front fender, yada, yada, yada. I usually start with what I like about the bike, but in this case, I think we're gonna switch it up and start with what I don't like about it. Number one, first con on my list, the kickstand issue is an absolute embarrassment for the engineers at KTM. In short, the issue is this: the kickstand spring is in the worst possible place and your heel will hit it while you're riding. This will either kill the engine with the kickstand switch and or cause the kickstand spring to shoot off into orbit, which happened to me. Or if you disable the kickstand switch, it can lead to your kickstand being down without you knowing it and causing a crash. Ask me how I know. Fortunately, Tusk, Rocky Mountain ATV, has fixed this problem with a $30 part, which moves the spring to the inside of the kickstand and away from your heel. It is a massive improvement, and I would say the closest thing to a must-have mod there is. Yes, there was a recall on the kickstand, but it was a stiffer spring. They just swapped that out. It didn't really help. That is the one that was on my bike when it decided to take off and try to catch up with the Voyager probe. Did nobody test this? I've watched a ton of videos on this bike and everyone seems to notice that it's a problem pretty much right away. I cannot believe that design got through R&D. And yes, I guess if you kick your heel out like you're supposed to all the time, or at least when you're riding tough stuff, it'll mitigate it somewhat. But your feet move around when you're riding hard terrain, and it's just, compared to every other bike I've ever ridden, it's a massive, massive issue. It's terrible design. The engine doesn't feel refined. KTMs always have that kind of box of rocks quality at idle, but they usually smooth out. Like the 790, 890 smooth out when you give it a ton of gas. This one does not. It just feels unrefined all the time. It feels cheap. Yes, that's subjective, but it's also just not very confidence inspiring. The exhaust is super lightweight and is low slung, which keeps it away from your luggage. Both great things, but it's too bad it sounds anemic and terrible. I wish the fuel tank was a little bigger so I could get 200 miles of range, but it's better than any dual sport and it makes it a little bit lighter, so take it or leave it. You kind of have to take it actually. But the biggest thing I don't like about this bike is the engine character. There's a lot of things about the engine character I don't like. The power is inconsistent at different revs. That's not unusual. Torque curves exist, but this one is just so weird. The power comes on quickly and surprisingly as you accelerate. About 7,000 RPMs, you finally start to feel some power. There's a dead spot in the throttle sometimes. There's no real rhyme or reason to that. If you throttle on and off, sometimes there's no power, sometimes there's a ton of power. And yeah, I've had the recall done, the fueling recall. I had it done as soon as I got the bike and it's still doing that. The recall does make it stall out less, but it still stalls out and you still have the dead zone. Also, there's almost no engine braking unless you're super high on the revs, like 6 or 7 grand or higher. It threw me off constantly. This bike is gutless. Beyond gutless at low RPMs. You better be ready to give it a handful of throttle if you need speed or power when you're going slow. But even then, when you do so, it is unpredictable and inconsistent. When you're cruising in the woods or on technical trails, it doesn't seem to matter what gear you're in, it is always the wrong one. If you want to stay in the power, you have to be on the throttle the whole time, which leaves very little room for error. Yes, my complaints about this bike are very similar to my complaints about the 690. This bike reminds me of the 690 a lot, except I dislike the 390 even more. At least the 690 has the benefit of bigger displacement to make up for some of these issues. This 390 is a street bike engine and it feels like it. Street bikes don't get ridden slowly for long periods of time, so you can stay in the revs and it's not as noticeable, but it is very noticeable on a technical off-road section or a sandy track where you need instant power to spin the rear and get back on top of the sand. I want to talk about highway performance separate from either pros or cons. It would be easy to condemn this bike for being buzzy at freeway speeds, but the truth is it isn't any worse than any other 400 street bike out there. They're all buzzy at freeway speeds. This bike is plenty tolerable for long highway stints, and with cruise control you can swap hands and avoid some of the numbness and other disadvantages that come with a lot of vibration in the handlebars. This bike will do 90 miles per hour, takes a while to get there. I haven't gotten it much past that. I had no problem passing pretty much anytime I wanted to. You just have to downshift and plan ahead, get the revs up. So highway performance is neither in the pros nor the cons section because it is what I would call fine. It's worse than a bigger ADV bike, but better than a smaller dual sport. It's exactly what you would expect. It's perfectly tolerable. Let's talk about what I do like about this bike, and there's a lot. First, lightweight. This thing on paper, I keep saying that for a reason, is 40 pounds lighter than any of its competitors, although some of that is the smaller fuel tank. Just as an example, the Ibex 450 claimed dry weight is technically 2 pounds lighter than the claimed 390 dry weight. For reference, I weighed this bike. It weighs about 410 pounds with a fuel tank. A stock Ibex 450 is 431 pounds fully fueled, so it's still quite a bit lighter, but not 40 pounds lighter. The lighter weight matters, and you can feel it. This bike has a very lightweight dual sport feel to it. It is way more nimble and maneuverable feeling than other small ADV bikes. That weight difference is noticeable. The bike feels narrow and light when it starts to lean or tip. I would often forget I was riding an ADV bike at all because it just handles very dual sporty. I got through stuff I would take no other ADV bike through on purpose. It's a whole different animal in terms of weight, suspension, and handling. And this extends to things like loading it on a hitch carrier or in a truck and driving with it in the back of the truck or on the hitch carrier or just moving it around the garage. I drove to Arizona and back with this thing on the rear hitch with my camper in the truck and it was fantastic. It is a great back of the motorhome type bike that will do anything you want it to do once you stop and unload it. You can add cruise control to this bike and it's fantastic. In my opinion, it's an absolute necessity. Just add it into the price and have the dealer do it before you take the bike home. You're still getting out the door under less than $8,000. It has a 6-axis IMU with cornering ABS and traction control. None of its competitors have this. The 450 GS might, I'd have to look it up, but it's not out yet. So right now, none of its competitors have it. It makes an absolutely noticeable difference. Again, it's not like a feature that's strictly required for an ADV bike, but it is super nice when you're riding hard and the rear starts to slide and you know that traction control is going to save you, and it's a big boost to safety when you're riding on the road. The off-road mode is great, and you can switch it while you're riding, which switches to off-road traction control and disables the rear ABS. You don't have to stop and hold a button down or anything like that. I wish there was more customizability in the off-road mode, maybe like a rally mode like you can get in some of the other KTMs, but for the price, it is outstanding. This bike is a ton of motorcycle for the money. It is an absolutely amazing value at $7,700. It has features you normally do not see on bikes that cost less than $10,000 or $12,000. It has hands down the best suspension of any small ADV bike out there, and it's not close. I rarely bottomed it out. The other bikes bottom like crazy when I do jumps or go up and down ledges or go through multiple whoops in a row. The suspension is also on-the-fly adjustable with clickers, at least the forks are, and again, you just don't see these features on cheap bikes. Even the Ibex, you have to use a screwdriver if you want to adjust the suspension. The screen is great, plenty bright, easy to read. I think the bike looks awesome. They did a great job with the design. It looks aggressive and capable of exactly what it's built for. It has so much going for it. It's low weight, it has a great price, it has decent highway performance, a fantastic trail feel, way above average suspension, and the best electronics in its class by far. It is definitely the closest thing to the unicorn that exists. It's easy to ride in all kinds of terrains and easy enough to pick up solo, so long as you don't crash over an embankment where you can't get it back up onto the road. Oops. So after several months and 1,400 miles on this bike, what is my final conclusion? How do I feel about the KTM 390 Adventure R? I gave serious consideration to adding this bike to my garage permanently. More than once, I started to suspect that this bike might be the answer to my prayers for a little more highway comfort in a bike I was unafraid to take on the toughest roads and trails. I don't do a ton of full highway days, but this bike would suffice when I needed to, while being perfect for my typical few hours on the highway type trips. Every time I started really enjoying this bike and thinking, man, this is the one. That damn throttle response issue would piss me off again. I made a quick short where I said the Tusk kickstand bracket fixed the second worst thing about this bike. Someone predictably asked in the comments, what's the first worst thing about this bike? And I said 2 words, the engine. There is no $30 bracket that's gonna fix a fundamental flaw built into the very heart of this machine. Maybe you can relate to this. I hope you can. Sometimes when you're out for a long off-road ride, you kind of get into what the athletes call the flow state. You're just kind of riding without thinking about it, your confidence is high, and you're riding well. Your body kind of takes over and you find yourself confidently conquering stuff that would probably frighten you if you stopped to think about it before you rode it. I have had this experience on every single bike I've ever spent significant time on, with 2 exceptions. The first was a KTM 690 and the second is the KTM 390 Adventure R. Why have I not had this experience on the 390 Adventure R? Because it kicks me out of that state constantly, because it almost never does what I expect it to. I'm constantly surprised at the lack of power or startled because the bike isn't slowing down at all when I let off the throttle. It's just so inconsistent in a way that I've not really experienced on any other bike, and I've ridden pretty much every other adventure bike under 900 cc's. I'm just used to tractor factor, that kind of low-end power where the bike won't die, it just chugs along like the KLR and the DRZ are famous for. Almost every single and twin-cylinder ADV or dual sport bike I've ever ridden has some sort of low-down tractor factor. This bike is just so different, and it's just not consistent on top of that. The 390 is simultaneously very easy to ride and very hard to ride. If you're a new rider who just wants to go slow and putt around at low RPMs, the throttle is passive and forgiving. You can putt along just fine without too much worry at all of it getting out of control or giving you more power than you want. But if you're an experienced rider who wants to go a little faster, well then you better be ready to be on the throttle and high on the revs the entire time. This bike can be exciting and powerful. It's the fastest bike in its class by far, but you have to go a lot faster than I'm comfortable with most of the time to get it there and keep it there. And yes, before you start typing, you may have done it already, this issue can be slightly mitigated by a new ECU and or changes to the tune. I have 3 responses to that. 1, it is my job to review bikes as you get them from the dealer, not as they could potentially be with expensive modifications not everybody else will make. 2, I was actually going to try it anyway because I wanted to see if it fixed it. I ordered the Kuber ECU and the Cat Delete setup, but it was back ordered, so I wasn't able to get it. And 3, I've spoken to several people who I trust in the industry who have done builds, who have done the Fuel X and the other mods, and they say it helps a little, but it doesn't solve the issue. On some level, the fundamental issue here is the engine itself. Before this bike came out, I went out on a limb and put it at the top of my list of best beginner ADV bikes. I still think it can be if it's your terminal bike and not a step on your journey towards larger or more capable options. It's definitely a bike that's both easy to ride at the beginning and still capable enough to be ridden hard on BDRs and beyond. Problem is, I think it'll ruin a new rider for pretty much every other bike out there. You'll get used to the weird power delivery and inconsistency, and the first time you get on pretty much any other ADV or dual sport bike, you'll find that all your ingrained skills and reactions don't really translate. You'll build a ton of bad habits that you'll then have to work to break. And yes, we can adjust to different bikes. My point is, if you're buying it, especially as a new rider, you're building fundamental skills that are really hard to untrain. I know because I did that on my 250L. I had a ton of bad habits that have taken me years to break. This bike is annoying to me because I now have habits based on riding what I would call normal dual sports and ADV bikes. The difference is that my current habits apply to 95% of bikes out there, so I'm not annoyed like this very often. It's what makes this bike stick out so much to me. It's the same reason why 690 owners always get upset when I say the bike is gutless and annoying at low revs. They're used to that, so they compensate for it without thinking. You can ride it just as well as any other dual sport, but when you ride it and another bike back to back, the difference is staggering. And yeah, I'm probably focusing in on this one issue way too much, but it was just that freaking annoying to me. This bike is so close to being damn near perfect, and for this one issue to be bad enough that I can't even find a way to live with it to gain all the other benefits of this well-designed and amazing bike is pretty damn telling. As it stands, and as big of a difference as the claimed 40 pounds of extra weight makes in handling, and there is a noticeable difference, I still prefer the Ibex to this bike. The Ibex is heavier and not as easy to maneuver, but I know what's going to happen when I twist the throttle. Right after I got the Ibex, I rode it in the deep sand and rocky climbs and descents of Death Valley, and I clicked with it right away. I didn't have to think about riding it. I could just ride it. It just does what I want it to do. I've ridden the 390 nearly 1,500 miles, and I have yet to have that experience. The 390 forces me to think about riding constantly, and the inconsistency is just so freaking annoying that I cannot personally, and let me stress again, personally get past it. The KTM 390 Adventure R is the lightest, fastest, and most capable of the small ADV bikes on the market. It is unique and fantastic 90% of the time, and for a lot of people it may be the exact bike they're after. Again, I may be focusing in way too much on this one issue, and for many it might not even matter, but in my personal opinion, it is a deal breaker. I wanted to love this bike. I wanted it to be the unicorn, and in many ways, it's still the closest thing we have, but personally, I just don't enjoy riding it. Every time I start to relax and connect with the bike, it does something I didn't expect, and it just never seems to be a good surprise. Other 390 owners out there, I hope that you'll chime in the comments with your experiences, because obviously for me personally, this one issue is a big deal. Maybe it's less of a big deal. Maybe you get used to it over more thousands of miles than I've done. This is my personal opinion. Yours may vary. Feel free to leave it in the comments. If you want more info on the 390 Adventure R, I've got a whole playlist of all the videos on it, including the BDR runs and a bunch of other testing and stuff that I did. So I'll leave a link to that playlist for you. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. And please do not forget to be excellent to each other. I thank you.
Excellent!